See, most people reach senior leadership positions because they're good at what they do. And then a day comes where they somehow stop growing. They have somehow hit an invisible ceiling and they are stagnating and they're doing everything they know to try and move to the next level. And it just doesn't happen. All of us will hit that moment in our journey where our typical strategies that have brought us success in the past no longer work. And that is a sign that you now need to go to the next level. And you can only go to the next level by going back down to the past and the basement of your consciousness.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Conscious Capitalists with myself, Timothy Henry, and my partner in making the world a better place through business, Raj Sisodia. Hello there, Raj.
Hey, Timothy. Happy New Year. I think this is our first episode of the new year. Good to see you.
It is indeed. And we have two special guests this week, and we won't argue about who's more special, but one of them, let me introduce, is Nilima Bhat. And Nilima is a visionary speaker and coach in the fields of personal mastery and leadership. She's the co-author of Shakti Leadership with my friend Raj, and she served as the distinguished professor in gender and conscious leadership at Technologique de Monterey. Together, they have unauthored the new book we're going to talk about today, Healing Leaders, a Manual for Life and Leadership Recovery. Nilima, welcome.
Thanks, Timothy. Thanks, Raj, for having me on your podcast.
And the other person who's the guest today needs no introduction at all because it's none other than Raj himself. So Raj and Nilima have both co-authored this wonderful new book. And that's what we're going to spend our time today talking about is healing leaders and healing leadership. And what does that mean? Why this book? Why now?
Well, Timothy, it seems like the natural progression of this journey into the world of, or the realm of healing that I've been on, I feel like, for the last decade almost. The journey, as you said, from the healing organization, which is more at a macro level, recognizing, of course, that it's the leaders who determine whether an organization is a healing organization or one that is creating unnecessary suffering in the world. And so we have to go back to the source, the root. And that's the leader. And of course, I experienced my own journey of healing in the last several years, a lot of which is documented in Awaken. I also wanted to share these 7 steps that had come to me in a silent retreat in 2018 at a place called Peace Village. That was kind of my year of conscious awakening. The year I turned 60, the year I was staring at my own mortality and looking at life in terms of looking back as well as looking ahead, the end of the second act and the beginning of the final act. And that year I had a variety of different experiences, thanks to people like Nilima and Lynn Twist and my coach and others that really enabled me to begin my own journey of healing, which I had kind of neglected up to that point. And in that process, as I said, in that silent retreat, I received these 7 steps, which are the core of this new book. And I kind of kept them aside for a while. I used a little bit of that in my memoir because they all applied to me at some level. And then about 3 years ago, Nilima and I discussed a new program that I was asked to teach on who do you need to be in order to teach conscious capitalism. This was for our faculty at Tech. And as we brainstormed ideas, we landed on those 7 steps and said, let's design a workshop around that. And then Nilima co-taught that with me. And that then led to this book. So it is, these are steps that came to me, as I said, in a silent retreat. So they're not something that I brainstormed and came up with. So I believe there's some additional power when you have that kind of a process, when you receive wisdom from somewhere, as opposed to just manufacturing it in your head.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. Now, Nilima, what I'm really interested in with you, among other things, I mean, you have really been a force of nature around the whole idea of bringing the feminine energy into leadership, both for men and for women. And I'm curious, what do you see as sort of the red thread, the continuity between Shakti leadership and the work that you've done on that space and this book?
Yeah, thanks, Timothy. So, this will be my third book. My first book was My Cancer is Me: The Journey from Illness to Wholeness. That came out in 2013. I was 47 years old. And then the next book was Shakti Leadership: Embracing Feminine and Masculine Power in Business. And that was in 2016 when I turned 50. And I realized about 5 years into Shakti Leadership that we need to write a book which is therapy for leaders. Because much as I was looking to raise leaders from just business as usual leaders to conscious leaders, I realized they can't go from 0 to 10 without first having go back and heal parts of themselves. And this is because I have been a therapist, a healer, a coach to people working through chronic lifestyle diseases such as cancer. I had the ability to spot therapeutic need when I was coaching a leader. And I realized coaching is not enough for leaders, training is not enough for leaders if they haven't done the inner work of healing their own psychological wounding. And all of us carry those wounds. So, in a way, My Cancer is Me and Shakti Leadership combine to now become healing leaders.
Wonderful. And Raj, let's go through. You say 7 steps of healing. Let's talk about those 7 steps. Why don't you summarize that for our audience?
So the 7 steps form a logical sequence, culminating in healing and starting with knowing yourself. The beginning of everything is self-knowledge. You have to know who you are. And I'm assuming we'll go into each of those steps in a little more detail as we go here. But it starts with knowing yourself, because you are unique among the 117 billion humans who have walked this planet. Every one of us is different. And you have to know who you are in order to live an authentic life and be an effective leader. Second is love yourself. It's not automatic if you know yourself that you love yourself. And without loving yourself, you cannot really receive love, nor can you spread love in the world. The third is to be yourself, to rest comfortably in your presence, to understand, to have a strong sense of who you are and be comfortable in that space. The fourth is to choose yourself. Too many of us live life as a victim of our own circumstances. Why was I born into this culture? Why was I adopted? Why was I had this kind of mother, this kind of father? And in that victim space, then we are not able to grow and we get stunted. But if we choose it, we say, I don't know what the gift is, but I know there's a gift in there somewhere. And sometimes it becomes very clear and sometimes it takes a while. But there's something there, right? So choose your past and then choose your present and choose your future, as we will talk about. Express yourself. So not only be comfortable in your own being, but now recognize, why am I here? What is my destiny and role to play in this lifetime? What's the hero's journey that I need to say yes to? What is my purpose? How do I live that? Okay? So that's expressing yourself and then completing yourself, which is the masculine, feminine, but also the elder and the child, all the 4 energies, integrating them within you, learning how to navigate polarities. So you are never stuck on any one side of a polarity. You always see the wisdom in the combination. That's the wholeness. And then the last is heal yourself, which is healing your psychological wounds and traumas. In addition to healing your body and healing the way you think about your life, your story, healing those psychological wounds and traumas. And that's a big one, because many of us don't acknowledge them or we minimize them, and we don't do anything to heal them, and therefore we live life in a way that is reactive. We get triggered by things and we don't even know why. As Nilima says, you're not driving your own car. Somebody else is driving your car.
So, Raj, one of the things that I'm really interested in is, there's a whole theory of adult development, or there's Richard Barrett's, levels of consciousness, and I'm really curious. Is this a book that really appeals to leaders, or can only really be understood by leaders when they reach a certain age? That with age comes a certain level of wisdom and self-awareness, and that it's really hard for a 20-year-old to appreciate this book the same way a 50 or 60-year-old would. And I'm curious about that and your view.
Yeah, well, I've been teaching this material for a few years now to our students at Technologico de Monterrey. And these are undergraduate students. And I've also done it with some executives and MBA students as well. But I find that the undergraduate students are very much responding to this, because if they can actually start thinking about these things at this stage of their life rather than waiting until they're 40 and 50, like I was almost 50 years old by the time I got to a place of knowing myself and loving myself, for example, or finding my purpose, right? Expressing myself. I think the earlier the better. And I think these ideas are very accessible and understandable. And yeah, if you can set these things in place at an early age, then I think you will be spared some of the unnecessary suffering. You can't be spared all suffering, but the unnecessary suffering that we create out of ignorance and out of not knowing how we can navigate life, I think would be spared. So I don't think it's limited to people who are at a certain stage of vertical development or at a certain age in their life.
So, Nilima, you mentioned earlier that in your coaching, one of the things you observed is that beyond just coaching, there was a need for psychological development, or there were some psychological issues. And I've always been fascinated by that line between somebody coaching and somebody starting to touch on some of the psychological issues or healing that needs to occur for a leader to fully develop. I'm wondering, how do you hold or manage that tension when you're coaching someone?
I actually think that the scope of coaching is quite limited. And coaching is okay if it's very behavioral and skill oriented. But most coaching today wants to be more than that. It's talking about life coaching and depth coaching and, understanding your underlying values and higher purpose. And the minute coaching tries to enter those wider realms, you enter the realm of understanding the psycho spiritual nature of your client. And for that, just a basic coaching certification may not be enough. And I had a background in yoga psychology, and spirituality, and just years of practice and study of integral yoga and depth psychology and so on. So it was easy for me to bring that to my coaching and to spot a therapeutic need or gap when I was coaching someone. And so I'm absolutely convinced that all of us, just because we're leaders doesn't mean we're all sorted and, healed. All of us as human beings carry some degree of psychological wounding from childhood and trauma and, life events that happen that are left unresolved and that we carry residue with. And so I do believe you have to bring more depth to coaching, and you must have a sense of psycho-spiritual understanding and some level of study and practice to really be effective even as a coach. I may be very controversial saying this here.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very controversial within the coaching community of, when are you coaching and when are you starting to get into that area where you are dealing with psychological issues that require maybe a different level of depth or training to address. And I know, some coaches are very aware of that, and unfortunately, some aren't. So it's a sticky issue. And Raj, that leads me into a question for you, which is, as we look at leadership development programs, right? How does something like this fit into a corporate leadership development program where they're developing the leaders in their organization? And how do you see this fitting into what's been traditional leadership development?
To the extent that we believe in authentic leadership, and many companies do, and they should, I think this is a necessary piece of that. So we've already been using this in that context, with leaders. We have a program, a 3-day program that we can do anything from 2 hours to 3 days, of course, but ideally a 3-day experiential program in a retreat setting that goes quite deep. So I think this very much should be and needs to be part of leadership development, because if we have a bunch of leaders running around who don't know themselves and are carrying all these wounds, and they don't love, if they are not actively practicing or embodying these 7 steps, then that can be incredibly harmful. to themselves and all the people they love and lead. And so I think it's, to me, a necessary step to actually bring all of these dimensions out in people. And some people may need more attention to some of those than others.
Nilima, I think you used the phrase therapy for leaders at one point in the book, and I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that, Nilima, in terms of, because you mentioned something, maybe in passing, you said for senior leaders. And there's a part of me that thinks that this really is, you need to have a certain level of experience of leadership and have progressed to a certain level where this is really an important investment in developing to the next level. And so I'm curious, when you use the phrase therapy for leaders, how do you interpret that when you're talking to somebody in the business world and get them excited about the idea?
See, most people reach senior leadership positions because they're good at what they do, right? And then a day comes where they somehow stop growing. They have somehow hit an invisible ceiling and they are stagnating and they're doing everything they know to try and move to the next level. And it just doesn't happen. And I don't want to name these leaders, but I know a bunch of them now. And which is why this idea for this book came to me, because I'm thinking, these are the smartest people I know, and they're stuck. And so I realized all of us will hit that moment in our journey where our typical strategies that have brought us success in the past no longer work. And that is a sign that you now need to go to the next level. And you can only go to the next level by going back down to the past and the basement of your consciousness, the subconscious mind, the unconscious mind. Discover what lies unhealed there, because there is trapped life force, there's trapped prana, energy there. And until that energy is released, you're not going to be able to move forward. So it's literally like sandbags weighing you down and you can move forward. So that's where this is coming from, because of having met real leaders who are super smart and stuck. And they need something new and different. And it's not more leadership skilling. It's not just regular leadership coaching. It's some level of depth psychology and trauma healing.
I love that. That's a really good way of describing it. And Raj, I'm looking at you and wondering, when you think about the male-female energy and dynamic, particularly in a world which unfortunately is over-indexed, as you've talked about several times, a little over-indexed on the masculine. How do you sort of see this fitting in terms of many of the leaders that are at a senior level and have a lot of that masculine energy? And now we're sort of saying, hey, we want you to think about this idea of therapy for leaders and this idea of developing in a different way than you may have thought of before.
Well, of course, we explicitly address that dimension in step 6, which is complete yourself. So that's the entire message of Shakti leadership. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, we've added the elder and the child energy into that mix. So to be a complete person, a whole person, you can't just be operating with one half or one quarter, right? I'm only masculine, I'm only a young male, let us say, right? Doesn't matter what age you are, you still have access to that deeper wisdom, your higher self, the elder energy within you. You still have access, even if you're 80 years old, you still have access to your inner child, healthy child energy, and you have access to that masculine and feminine. And so the integration of those, and once you become conscious of where you tend to normally play and the others where you tend to avoid or you don't feel comfortable, then you can cultivate and develop those capacities to become the lovely phrase that Nilima coined, which is the wise fool of tough love. You have the wisdom of the elder, you've got the playfulness of a child, which is where joy and laughter and creativity come from. And you've got that toughness and you're rooted in love. So all 4 energies coming together in your own unique way. Each of us can be our own wise fool of tough love. So if you look at a Dalai Lama, or you look at a Herb Kelleher, right? You look at many great leaders, they really embody all of those things. all of those dimensions.
So let's start with step one, know yourself. Well, the Greeks were talking about that more than 2,000 years ago, right? Know thyself. And so tell me a little bit about what that means in the context of the first of your 7 steps.
Each of the steps actually has subtext to it and sub steps to it. So one aspect of knowing yourself is really knowing how you identify. What identity do you hold? Because there is gender, there is race, there's religion, there is economic status. There is so much that privileges you and underprivileges you that you may never ever have thought about. So, at a time when people are talking diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, if you haven't first understood what have you packed into your identity, you don't even know who you are and why you're showing up the way you're showing up. So, we have a good section on unpacking your identity. But then it's not just about that. It's also, as Raj will talk about more, but the third part of that is going beyond the small self into the big self, right? That the higher self that you are, the true self that you are, the universal self that you are. So there are so many selves within us. So when we say know yourself, it's really about unpacking and unlayering all those selves, all the way from the small s to the big S. So, yeah, Raj, you want to add to that?
And then over time, you discover your core values. And you might be shaped by certain people in your life that make you attuned to that, but there's something that is connecting to that is already there inside you. Right? So what are those core values that are sacred to you? What are those qualities that are natural to you? And leaning into those and recognizing, yeah, that is who I am meant to be. I'm not limited by that, but that certainly is, I can't reject that. Now, in my case, just to make it personal, I, from a young age, it was very evident that I was very idealistic, I was very peace-loving, I was very trusting, etc., etc. Qualities that I had and my mother also had, and she probably reinforced those. But then when my father came into my life when I was 7 years old, he saw all of those things because he was in a way meeting me for the first time as an actual person. And he saw all those qualities as weaknesses. And he made it very clear to me that you shouldn't trust anybody. You're too idealistic. You need to be pragmatic. You're too peace-loving. You need to be rough and tough. And you're okay.
He was
You're good in
toughening
school,
you
but
up. He was toughening you up
yeah,
for life, Raj.
you're good in school, but that doesn't matter. You need to be street smart and all of that, right? So again, from that point on, I tried to be the opposite of who I was in many ways. So at a subconscious level, I was trying to please my father, right? And so I was in a way going against my own nature. And that's not something that we advocate at all. You have to understand and work with your own nature.
So even within the know yourself, there's what I'm hearing is there's degrees. There's like knowing myself in terms of my values, my strengths, my weaknesses. And then there's a deeper level, which is who am I? What was I shaped by? What were, as you said, trying to please my father, but, honoring my mother. And that's deep. That's really deep work. And again, at different levels, I guess, where you can meet somebody where they are. In terms of how open they are to going into the big S self, Nilima, as you mentioned.
And the journey doesn't end, right? You can't say, okay, I'm going to take this weekend and get to know myself. I mean, you're going to uncover, I think we use the analogy of an onion, right? You keep uncovering layers to yourself. And when you're put into a new situation, a new country, a new environment, then suddenly you find out something about yourself. I say, wow, I didn't know that about myself. I remember Nilima and I were teaching a program at Esalen some years ago on Shakti leadership, and one of the participants said something very insightful, and then she said, "Wow, I'm so in awe of myself right now." So I didn't know that I knew that. So again, there are things that you keep uncovering over your lifetime.
All right. So step two. Let's work through step 2, Raj. Love yourself.
Yeah, so it's not automatic that if you know yourself, you're going to love yourself. And what does that do when you don't love yourself? Many things. As Francis Meehan says, men are at war with each other because every man is at war with himself. When you don't love yourself, you've got that inner conflict that will then show up as outer conflict. It will show up as violence and aggression. On a more personal level, when you don't love yourself, you don't also deem yourself worthy of receiving the love of others. Because if somebody else says they love you, your inner dialogue is, well, they don't know me. Once they know me, they won't love me. How could they love me? I don't love myself because I know me, right? And so you become isolated in that way, right? And then when you don't love yourself, you don't take care of yourself. Why would you care about this body? Why would you care about this mind or anything about yourself? You abuse, all of the self abuse that we do and doing things that we know are harmful to our own beings. And yet we do that. That comes from a place, there's the sort of I think, Nilima, you talk about not mythos. What's the one that's the death impulse? What is that?
Thanatos.
Theratos. Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's some kind of an energy there that is almost seeking death in a way, that you get to that place. So the consequences of not loving yourself are many for yourself, for your relationships, and for the impact that you're going to have in the world. So we have to get to a place of not only self-acceptance and self-compassion, because we should have as much compassion for ourselves as we do for others. But most of us would readily forgive somebody else, but we don't forgive ourselves, right? So self-forgiveness, self-acceptance, self-compassion, self-forgiveness, and ultimately self-love. And recognizing that you did not make yourself. You received your being as a gift from
Mm,
creation. You
mm,
received this entity
yeah,
that is the culmination of 4.5 billion years of evolution on this planet,
yeah,
right? And which we can't even comprehend the depth and beauty of this creation that we are privileged to have, right? So you are a gift to yourself and to the world. But when you don't love yourself, that means you're being deeply ungrateful for this gift. And this is not only for you. Through this being, it's meant to bring something to the world. That you have to love yourself in order to be able to manifest that.
brilliant. Actually, beautiful. Thank you for that, Raj. And Nilima, step 3. Take us through step 3.
Step 3 is be yourself. And this is really all about learning to be present and not putting on a mask, allowing yourself to reveal who you are and to receive the truth of what others are. And for that, you truly have to be yourself fearlessly with nothing to defend, nothing to promote, nothing to fear.
Mm,
And you've got kind of be so at ease with who you essentially are that you become a psychologically safe space for people to be with. And all this comes under a cultivating presence,
mm.
and presence being the master key. So we spend years teaching presence, and so there's a good amount of that in the book. A lot of it comes from the wisdom of the Enneagram. And yeah, so as you say, be yourself because everyone else is taken. We have to be who we essentially are.
And what do you see as some of the key steps? You mentioned the Enneagram as one sort of beginning place, like this is one version of who I am. Earlier, Raj had mentioned something around purpose. And, this must be a place where, we do find that inner sense of who we are. And I'm wondering what are some of the steps that you take people through? 1 or 2 steps that people can say, oh yeah, that's how I get into this.
So there are these signals of presence, So is my body relaxed? Is my breath even? Is my mind clear? Is my heart open? Am I a sensitive sonar? Am I picking up all the important information from my context, or am I so, blinkered in self absorption? And do I have the ability to energetically induct others into their own presence when I'm present? So these are practices. Each one of these signals is something you practice. And when you master them, you are able to go beyond your superficial, ordinary ego self and rest in the ground of your being.
Cool. So this is really about that presence, being grounded, being present in the moment. Great. Raj, over to you. Step 4.
Step 4 is somewhat unusual in the sequence. It's called choose yourself. And what we mean by that is you choose your past, choose your present, and choose your future. Now, what does it mean to choose your past? You cannot change your past. Your past is your past and it is in the past. But can you psychologically go through the process of embracing it and choosing it and even being grateful for it, even the challenging parts of it? because then it might be able to serve you. Then you might find the nuggets of gold in that difficult experience. Otherwise, you will remain a victim to your own life, your whole life. And likewise, you can start connecting the dots. When you look back and say, wow, that seemed like the worst thing in my life at the time. But now I look back and say, oh my God, that was the most significant thing that happened in my life, even though it was very painful at the time. So choosing your past means choosing everything that happened, all the people that came into your life. Everything is there to teach you something, if you look at it in the right way. That choosing your present is about living with gratitude. And then, of course, choose your future. And that is about saying yes to the call to adventure, the hero's journey that every one of us needs to be on. It's like that caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly without dying to its old self. Right? Now, we humans have to choose that. Caterpillar is not in charge, but we are in charge of our own evolution, our own mutation. We have to say, I want to evolve myself, right? I'm going to choose that, choose to take on that danger, right? And that uncertainty that entails. I'm not going to stay safely in my cocoon for my whole life. That doesn't amount to anything.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's beautifully put. It's beautifully put, Raj. All right, we're on to step 5. Nilima, step 5. Take us through step 5.
Yeah, so step 5 also begins with step 4 being done in a conscious way. So, one of the things I've added to the hero journey is the idea of a conscious hero's journey, to where you choose to, instead of a crisis to wake you up, you choose some sort of a death or release or move on from some aspect of your life that is no longer working for you. And you release it, you dissolve it, you let it go, and then you engage some unrealized potential. So instead of having to be whacked into growth, you actually choose growth. And then on the other side is your evolution. And when you evolve, you bring resolution to the world with some elixir, right? So it's the conscious hero journey that is an addition from me to this work. And how do you do that conscious hero journey? That takes you into step 5, which is express yourself. So the conscious hero journey is about really getting in touch with your core values, your natural gifts and talents, having a higher self dialogue to ask your own inner wisdom, your higher wisdom. Who am I? Why am I here? What have my life experiences, training really set me up for? Nothing is an accident. What is my bliss that I need to follow? What is my heartbreak that the world really needs, but maybe just to show up and get done? So there's good amount of work here in this chapter, where at the end of it, using both cognitive and intuitive methodologies, you kind of arrive at perhaps what would we call your ikigai, right? We don't use that language, but it's that kind of convergence of how you put all these things together, and you have your higher self that gives you a more intuitive distilled answer that summarizes your power symbol for you and your power statement for you, your purpose statement for you. So this is where I think the map starts getting exciting, and it's still work, but it's more fun.
So tell me a little bit about what 4 and 5 meant for you, Nilima. I mean, what was your awakening, and how did that manifest itself? What did that look like for you?
We go on many journeys. So I think my hero journey was very much when at age of 32, with 10 years of corporate experience, I had this existential crisis. I went overnight from being the blue-eyed girl of, my boss at ESPN Star. I was looking after 25 countries across Asia Pacific, and I was riding high, and I was only 32. I'd bought my own apartment by then. I had the trophy husband and 2 children, 1 boy, 1 girl. I had it all. I was only 32. And suddenly, my life just went into a flip. Am I defined by my external successes, or am I defined by my essential nature? And can I stand in confidence in who I essentially am and not be judged by my successes and failures? So that was one hero journey, kind of encountering your own shadow and integrating your ego and shadow. Then the heroine's journey began with kind of my marriage unraveling. It was very much we were the golden couple, we were the golden family. And yet, when that arc played out, I discovered when I was reaching into my 50s, I was becoming my own person now once the children left home. And where I was going was different from where my husband was going. And that was very, very, very hard. And yet it comes where you have to follow who you are. It's not about sacrificing who you are just because there is something called a marriage that you have to then unhappily live ever after into, So that was my heroine's journey, becoming my own mother, my own beloved. And now the third journey is really about becoming your own Shakti, your own higher self, your own goddess archetype, whatever you want to call that, but is essentially integrating it to your big S, right? That is a very spiritual journey. And this is the journey I'm on today. I turned 60 this year. And Shakti Leadership came out when I turned 50. Healing Leaders is coming out when I turn 60. And clearly, I'm now poised for self actualization, enlightenment, embodiment, enlovement. And that journey I will go on every day because there's nothing more exciting or worth living for.
Well, thank you for sharing that personal side of, that there are these life transitions that come up and they're naturally a part of many people's lives. And, as you said earlier, Raj, when this happens, you have to choose. Do I choose to lean into it and grow and develop, or do I bypass it and push it down? So thank you for sharing that, Nilima. Hey, let's go to step number 6.
Complete yourself. So this is the whole piece about becoming whole. And there are many levels of wholeness. There's spiritual wholeness and ecological wholeness, but we focus on psychological wholeness. And Jung talks about the fourfold self, that at a minimum we have these 4 poles inside us. And this comes from Eric Burns' transaction analysis and many traditions actually. So the parent adult child model is a well-known one from TA from the 50s. So from aware adult, you know how to access your healthy parent and how to access your healthy child. So that is also like the ego shadow integration. That is your first level of wholeness, completing yourself. And then that's the apprentice piece. Then the masterpiece is becoming your own anima and animus, your inner masculine and inner feminine, the sacred union, the inner wedding taking place inside of you, regardless of your gender. So this is that masculine, feminine coming together. So I call this the holy family reunion within. And putting it together, the archetype of a whole leader, or what I call a Shakti leader, where you have found all your power bases, is when you become the wise fool of tough love. So wise is your healthy inner elder or parent energy. Fool is your healthy inner child energy. Tough is your healthy masculine, and love is your healthy feminine. And at any given time, you should be able to play any one of these to a situation as required.
Well, one of the things that struck me as you were talking about that was the idea of joy and bringing joy into your life as a leader, right? Like, we don't often have that discussion. Like, how joyful is your leadership journey versus, hey, a bunch of other questions you might ask. So talk to me a little bit more about the joyful part of the journey here for a leader.
And of the 4, I must say that's the one I tend to lose touch with, because when you're a leader and you're a healer and somehow you have to stand up in front of hundreds and thousands of people and speak like you know something they don't, you tend to forget your inner child, right? So my mother having just passed 3 weeks ago, I think I now have to become my own child and my own mother. So there'll be much more of that energy in my life. And the word is joy. Really, that is the word. Ananda, Anandi.
So Raj, talk to me a little bit about how you bring joy into your leadership role in your life.
Well, like Nilima, I need to remind myself to do that consciously, because I can get very serious, right? And But so for me, the wise and the loving come naturally, but I have to work on the foolishness, the playfulness, right? Letting myself go and just be, and of course the toughness as well. I have to lean into the healthy masculine, draw boundaries, be able to engage in conflict when necessary.
More joy
All
for all
work
of
and
us.
no play. All work and
Yeah.
no play makes Raj a dull boy.
We don't want him to be a dull boy. We want him to be a joyful boy. All right. Now, joyfully take us on to step number 7, Raj.
Yeah, so this is kind of the culmination of the whole thing. I mean, all of these steps are really part of your healing. Right? The word healing also has wholeness as one of its roots. But this is now explicitly about healing your psychological wounds and traumas. All of us carry them. Now, in addition to that, we talk about healing your story. So much of your experience of life is dependent on how you explain life to yourself. So if you frame it, and that's how you become an optimist or a pessimist, just how you explain things that happen. And there are certain mental patterns that you get into that will take you down the road of becoming a pessimist. So likewise, if you tell your story, the story of your life to others or even to yourself as a victim, that has a certain energy to it. And it might be true. Yeah, the bad things did happen to you. Or you can tell the story of your life as a hero. And those are also true things, right? But the third one is, what's my story as a learner? What are the things that happen and how did I learn and grow from those things? And that's the most empowering version. So try to have that mindset about your life. That growth mindset, I think, is what it's also talked about, right? The second one is to heal your body. Now, healing your body is something we should be doing all along, but as you get older, it suddenly becomes more urgent. And your body,
Yeah.
as Neha, my partner, says,
Starts to
your
send you
body
little
is,
messages.
yeah, so your body is very polite. First it speaks in whispers, and then it gently nudges you, and then it, shakes you a little bit. And if you still don't pay attention, then it kind of hits you over the head. And next thing you know, you're lying on the ground, right? With a heart attack or a stroke or something. So, and then the third is healing your psychological wounds and traumas. PTSD is a diagnosed condition. I believe about 13 million Americans have been diagnosed with PTSD, having gone through severe trauma. Maybe they were uh, deployed in a war zone, or maybe they were first responders, or whatever profession they might be in. But I believe all of us have some degree of PTSI, post traumatic stress injury, because life is hard and trauma has happened to all of us, some of which are predictable. Every child is likely to go through certain kinds of trauma where they feel that they don't belong, where they feel that they're not enough, where they somehow feel that they're alone. These things can happen when you hear your parent express disappointment. Oh God, I'm not enough. Or your friends push you out of the sandbox. I don't belong, right? And these can get imprinted on your soul, and then you end up, in life just trying to compensate for some of these things. And then there are other more severe traumas that can happen, personal traumas, bad things that happen to you that should not have happened. Abuse, obviously, neglect, um, and good things that should have happened but did not happen. So children that were orphaned or were not adequately, physically held or loved, that's a deep wound, and there's something that that impacts them for the rest of their life, right? So again, there's personal trauma, things that happened to you directly or did not happen that should have happened. There's family-based trauma, things that happened to your parents. All of our parents, just like us, went through trauma of their own. And now we didn't experience that directly, but we grew up in the shadow of that, in the energy field of that trauma, right? And certainly it impacted us. So we need to understand what trauma is sitting there. And then the trauma in our lineage. Um, Epigenetics is showing us now that things that happened multi generations ago in your ancestors can still impact your behavior and your experience of life, because certain genes expression gets turned on or off. So why do we have irrational fears? Why do some of us have phobias and we didn't have a direct experience? We're just afraid of dogs, or we're afraid of heights, or we're afraid of tight spaces. There could be something that happened to somebody in your lineage, that somebody died, in those ways. So we need to understand what trauma is sitting in my lineage, and then of course collective trauma, things that happen in the world that all of us share. So we all went through a pandemic together. Many of us came out of it okay, but many other people died and others were deeply traumatized by it. So this was a global trauma that we all experienced, right? So we need to acknowledge all of these And we need to understand which of them are present in my case, and I believe all of them are present in all of our cases. And then how do I deal with it? I have my own traumas with my father. I have trauma in my family of origin, with my grandfather and an honor killing that happened. I have trauma in my lineage of the warrior caste in India and all the battles and the invaders that they tried to fight off, and the women and children committing mass suicide and all kinds of stuff, right? So what do you do about it? Well, there's one way that you handle it, that most of us handle it, which is, first of all, we minimize it. And we say, well, listen, I didn't go to Afghanistan or Iraq, and why should I whine about my little problems? Other people have it much worse. And that is always true. Doesn't matter how bad it is, other people have it worse, right? So that doesn't mean that your trauma is irrelevant. It's still important. It's for you. You have to address that. Now, what most people do is that they numb it. First of all, they conceal it. They don't talk about it. It's a shameful thing to admit that I was abused or that this thing happened in my family or whatever it was, right? So you conceal it, you hide it, and then just to be able to survive, you numb it. And we live in a world that is full of numbing mechanisms. Now, what's the other way? You have to reveal it and feel it in order to begin to heal it. No trauma can heal in secrecy. You have to talk about it. The more openly, the better. I mean, I happen to write a book about it, but if you talk, at least talk to therapists, but even talk to your friends, talk to your family, everybody, take it out. As Mr. Rogers said, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. And everything is mentionable, you know. And other people are sitting on their own secrets. And once you talk about it, like when I talked about my family in my book, I thought just like there was a Me Too movement, there could be a We Too. Yeah, my family also had stuff like this. Okay, everybody has these, right? And people can bring it out into the open where it can then heal, right? And we're living in a time when there's many modalities available for healing. All kinds of therapeutic modalities, drama therapy, EMDR, psychedelics, all kinds of things are available. So we can heal. And then there's a beautiful gift waiting on the other side. If you're able to acknowledge and then heal your traumas, you can experience post-traumatic growth. And what that means is you're now stronger because you had a trauma and you healed it. Now you become the source of healing for others, a pillar of strength for others. It's like the Japanese art of kintsugi, right? The piece of pottery is now stronger because you put it back together and you strengthened it along its fault lines. And now it's a work of art and much stronger. That could be us, right? Our wounds, our scars are precious because they are showing us where we have healed and how we can help others. So that's kind of the arc. There's a beautiful documentary by Gabor Mate called The Wisdom of Trauma, which actually gets into that. At some point, you may end up saying, I'm grateful I had that trauma because I've been able to now heal it and help other people and find my own meaning and purpose in my life because of that.
So, Raj, last question for you. Healing leaders, healing organizations, connect the two.
Well, to me, it's very evident that you cannot have a healing organization with a leader who is not healed. And they have their own traumas, they don't know themselves, they don't love themselves. You were going to create a hurting organization. So the more you heal, and of course, it's on a continuum. You don't read this book and do everything in the book says, and now you're fully healed, right? I mean, it's an ongoing
Really?
journey.
Oh, shucks.
The 7 steps are not one and done because you can go through all of them. And now over time, you're going to know yourself again at a new level. Who am I now? Right? And you have to love yourself so again, it continues. It's like an upward spiral. And so the more you work on that, the more you're going to manifest that. I think Nilima uses the phrase, the macrocosm is a reflection of the microcosm. So we need to work on the microcosm. Keep working, never ending. There's no end point to this until the day you pass. You should be working on yourself. And the more you do that, especially if you're in a position of leadership, the more that is going to get amplified and multiplied into the world. And by the same token, if you don't do that, all of that trauma will result in massive levels of suffering out there in the world as well.
Well, connect that to conscious capitalism because, we talk about an organization can't be more conscious than the level of consciousness of the leader. And, you're saying an organization can't be more healing than the level of healing of the leader. Connected to the conscious capitalism approach.
I think you just did, right? I mean, this is an aspect of consciousness. This is consciously looking at yourself, understanding what needs to be done, what needs to be healed, right? And then going through that. So you're being very, very conscious. by adopting these steps and working on them. And when you do that, you're going to elevate the consciousness and implied within that, the healing level within your family, within your community, within your organization, everywhere.
Beautiful. Nilima, final thoughts and reflections for our audience. One takeaway you want people to have from today's podcast.
I think the figure 8 is coming up for me because one of the 4 tenets of conscious capitalism is conscious leadership. And we have many models for how to be a conscious leader. So that's like the upper part of the figure 8. But then you realize that it's not complete until you make that journey into the underworld and you do the inner healing journey as well. So you cannot be a conscious leader until you have also done the inner journey for self-healing.
Well, Nilima, Raj, thank you so much for a deep, soulful conversation today. This is such an important topic for not just business, but for humanity, really. Can't heal people unless we do this work, and then you can heal organizations, and then we can heal the planet. So thank you for the work and the pioneering expression of this that you've got in your new book. And thank you to our audience. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, then please go over to Apple Podcasts and iTunes and give us a rating and leave us a message. And if you enjoyed listening to today, also hit subscribe on whatever platform you're currently listening to. Big thank you to Rainbow Productions for helping us produce this, and to Conscious Capitalism, Inc. for being our sponsor for this and making it possible. Nilima, thank you so much. Raj, thank you so much.
Thank you, Timothy.
Thank you.